I'd ask you just to stand, even though you're all celebrities, as I introduce you, just so that everybody knows. National, Maurice Williamson.
Good evening.
Evening.
Labour, Barry Kirker. Greens, Richard Leckinger. New Zealand First, John Reeves.
Good evening.
Conservative Party, Andrew Craig.
Good evening.
And Internet Mana, Roger Fowler.
Kia ora.
We are still hoping that Jamie White from ACT will arrive. And we've had apologies from Rangi McLean of the Maori Party, who has a prior TV commitment, and United Future, who are not standing in Pakuranga. So the first question comes from Sister Bridget Crisp, a Sister of Mercy and member of the Catholic Justice and Peace Commission.
Before posing the first question, I need to summarise the Catholic Bishop's statement as I was told. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Towards the end of July, the Catholic Bishops of Aotearoa, New Zealand released a statement on the coming election. Within the statement, the bishops encouraged all readers to engage in the political process by praying, thinking, talking, asking questions, and to actively participate in political debates, forums and panels such as this one, so that when we come to vote, we are fully informed and aware of what my choice, your choice, every single voter's choice represents. Within our discernment and thinking in preparation to vote, we are encouraged to think of Catholic social teaching, of which key principles are human dignity, solidarity, preferential option for the poor and vulnerable, common good, subsidiarity, stewardship and participation. These principles underpin not only what it means to be a Catholic, but Christianity also. And examples of each can be found throughout the Gospel stories. As well as considering key Catholic social teaching principles, the New Zealand bishops also ask us to consider in our discernment people living in poverty, people living with pain, illness, or are approaching the end of their lives, unborn children, refugees, asylum seekers and migrants, people in prison, and people without a vote. Many of the issues being discussed and raised in the community affect many of the people I have just mentioned. As the bishops state in their release, the issues are someone's reality. One issue I would like to place in front of each of our candidates tonight is child poverty. 1 in 4 children in New Zealand live in poverty. This is a shocking statistic, and it is an area that requires immediate action. My question to the candidates echoes the question raised by Brian Bruce at the Justice and Peace Forum last Tuesday night. Regardless of which party wins, will you be prepared to initiate cross-party discussions and solutions to actively bring an end to child poverty in New Zealand?
So I'm going to talk about, first of all, where I come from in terms of my approach and why I'm standing as a candidate for the Labour Party, because that also links to the values of the Labour Party, because they're very similar where I'm coming from and where the Labour Party is coming from. So I'm a psychologist, and I realised when I was working with people at individual level, one-to-one, that you can only go so far with trying to help somebody make the changes so they can be more prosperous or achieve justice or a greater sense of fairness in their lives. You can only go so far working them individually. I really started to realise that societal issues, society was a big part of how successful somebody can be in New Zealand. And obviously how society is a reflection on the government policies. Yeah, you've probably all heard people say, oh well, anyone can be like John Key, look at him, he worked his way up from a disadvantaged background. Well, actually, I don't believe that's true. Most people who know about stuff in this area realise that's not true. It's just not possible for most people to do that because they don't have the resources and they don't have the skills to be able to do that. And the system that they're in terms of society, most of the time sort of stops them from being able to do that. Yeah, so that's just not really possible. I also hear people saying, well, people that are disadvantaged in our country, it's because they there's something about them they're lazy, or they've got some sort of flaw or something, or there's some issues in their family. Well, again, I think people give too much focus on the individual and not enough on the environment they're in when they say those sort of things. So this is where I'm coming from. That's why I'm running for Labour. I believe Labour has got the approach and the values necessary to solve some of the issues we've got in New Zealand. Now, that statement referred to poverty, of course. Poverty is a big problem. I've been doing a few of these meetings now, and you always hear the National Party sort of talk things up, and really I think they're in a bit of denial about what's actually happening in terms of poverty in New Zealand. We have got a problem. So Labour's approach really is from the womb all the way through. So it starts off, obviously, if you can give a child the best start in life. So Labour's going to sort of be funding for all pregnant mothers to actually get the care they need from the health system. So there'll be more money going in, so it's free for all contacts for pregnant mothers through the health system. After the child is born, we've got our Best Start policy, which gives all new families $60 a week, and that's all new families for the first year, and then after that, the families that need it more, that support continues on. We're also extending a paid paternity leave to 6 months, okay? So again, there's more chance for a parent to be at home and support the child without the financial pressure of having to be back at work. Obviously, I can't go into too much detail about our policies, but I encourage you to go online, look at Labour's policies. There's a lot of policies there designed to do something about child poverty, including, really importantly, raising the minimum wage, okay? We want to raise the minimum wage, and that's what we're going to do. And I just finally want to talk about that we can't do it, the government can't do it its own.
Okay, that's it. Andrew Craig from Conservative.
So yes, obviously poverty is an issue in our country, and the Conservatives are keen to do something about that. You would have seen that we're wanting to make the first $20,000 of income tax-free to give a lift for those families that are most in need. We're also very keen to have parental leave extended to 6 months, and also for apprenticeships, to get people in working. It's by far the best way of getting people out of poverty is to get them working. But what I really wanted to talk about tonight, because it's quite a limited format, is I think we've got a fundamental issue with democracy in this country, and that's really what I'd like to take most of my time tonight about. As you know, the Conservatives stand for binding referenda, and there's something that we desperately need in this country, because so often, we have 5 times, as a nation of people, we've said, look, this is what we want. 5 times, different governments have ignored that. This isn't good enough. We don't live in a democracy. We have people who fought, we had people who gave their lives that we might be free, that we might live in a democracy. Well, folks, we don't. It makes me mad, and people have given up voting because they go, well, what's the point? You know, we vote one lot in, they promise us this, we don't get it. We vote the other lot in, they promise us this, we don't get it. They give us citizens-initiated referenda so the people of this country can have a say, so that we can have democracy. 5 times we've sent a clear message, the majority of us saying, no, this is what we want, and what's happened? They've ignored us. Look at the last one. Our Prime Minister said before the referendum was run, don't bother, I'm going to ignore what you're going to say. Folks, that's a serious state of affairs that we have in this country. Something's got to be done. Each 3 years, we have candidates cycle around and say, trust me, give your vote to me. What do? We trust them, give their vote to them. What happens? They do their own thing. Folks, this has got to change. We've got to get some control. We've got to be able to maintain that control and get the things that as a nation we agree are important. There's a Maori saying that I'd like to share. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Translated, it's the people, it's the people, it's the people. It's the people that matter. It's the people we've got to care about. And it's the people of this nation that have got to be in control. Not a group of politicians. Usually it's just a majority, just over 60, making decisions for a nation of over 4 million. Not good enough. When things matter enough for citizens to initiate a referenda, and we decide as a majority that something should be done, it must be done. I echo the words of Abraham Lincoln when he said, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, will endure. Stand up.
Good place to finish. Richard Lettinger.
Same kitchen timer at home. Let me know when the eggs are ready. It's great sound. Ngā mihi nui kia koto katoa. My name is Richard Leckinger. I'm the Green Party candidate for Maungakiki. It's almost irrelevant because we're only ever here to ask for your party vote, not for a candidate vote. In terms of the question asked, I applaud the Bishop's statement. And on behalf of the Green Party, I can say that there is only one elephant in the room, and so I will name it. It is the abortion policy of the Green Party. But that is the only policy that is in conflict with what's in the Bishop's statement. So I'll name that, and I'll also just say that none of our MPs are required to vote in a particular way on that. It is a conscience issue for our MPs, and a number of our candidates have opted out of it this election. So that's the elephant in the room addressed. Let's get down to the serious question of child poverty, because it has been a key Green Party plank for the whole 20 years we've been in the MMP system. Basically, the Bishop's statement, as far as we're concerned, hits on the two moral issues of our time, and they are climate change and inequality. Child poverty is the glaring symptom of inequality. They're the ones who are feeling it the most, because they are the ones with the least say as to what goes on in this country and how the money's spent. Over the last 6 years, we have added an entire Gisborne's worth of children living in poverty, 35,000. But it would be disingenuous to say, oh, it's all National's fault, because this has been a growing problem starting in the 80s. Actually, it existed before then, but it's been accelerating since the 80s. But the truth is, we now have the fastest growing inequality in the OECD right here in New Zealand, and that is reprehensible. In the last 6 years, we have borrowed $40 billion, $200 million a week, roughly. Only a few weeks of that borrowing of the last 6 years could have eradicated child poverty. It would only take a few weeks. It would only take a few tens of kilometers of new motorway that we could trade to eliminate child poverty. So we've got our priorities wrong. That's the Green Party argument. Of course, our three key planks are a cleaner environment, a fairer society, and a smarter economy. Because we've got a low-wage-driven economy at the moment, and it's getting worse. The complexity of our economy has declined precipitously in the last 6 years. But I'm running out of time, so my plea to you, of course, is please consider giving your party vote to the Green Party and your constituent vote to the candidate that best represents your values. Kia ora.
Thank you, Morris.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Morris Williamson. I'm the Member of Parliament here in Pakuranga, and I want to address the issue by starting with a quote from Margaret Thatcher. She said, nobody, and given that you're a faith-based audience, I think you may appreciate it, no one would remember the Good Samaritan if he only had good intentions. He also had the money. And that's the fact about this. You have to grow the economy. You have to have the wealth in the first place, rather than just decide about how you're going to share an ever-decreasing pie. So I have a great deal of pride in how we've managed the economy of this country for the last 6 years. We came into office just as the global financial crisis hit. Other parties will almost say it didn't happen. Well, it was the greatest sort of detriment to the world's economy that we've had ever since the 1920s Great Recession. Other countries have taken an absolute battering and fallen almost completely out of bed with it. Even our great friend Australia across the way is facing a decade of deficits, a decade of economic shrinking. Our economic growth now is forecast to be amongst the best in the developed world. And why am I telling you all this? Well, it's simple. If you actually want to lift the income of everybody, you'll actually bring people up the same way. A rising tide lifts all boats. But you will always have a definition of people who are poor. Because if it's the bottom 25%, even if we could double the income of this country, there will still be a 25% living in poverty. Because poverty is relative. poverty in Dubai will be a totally different thing to poverty in Sri Lanka. And all I can say to you is that I'm exceedingly proud of a government that has weathered some of the worst financial conditions the world's ever thrown at us. On top of that, had one of the worst natural disasters that any country could have withstood. And now the numbers speak for themselves. A huge level of economic growth relative to any other country going on. Surpluses are going into the future and beginning to retire some of the debt that's going on. Huge number of people, 53,000 more people in work just last year. Work is where you will lift the incomes of families and actually lift people out of poverty. Now, in the meantime, there is a very good welfare system that does provide a lot of support, the Working for Families tax credit package, the child family tax credit stuff, the paid parental leave that we've bought, that we've increased the time frame of, the free doctor's visits to up to 13-year-olds have all done a bit to address a whole range of that, and the Warm Up New Zealand and so on. But in the end, what you've got to start thinking about is how do you grow the pie, make a wealthy nation out of us, and then you will lift everybody out of that poverty trap. Thank you very much.
Jamie White from ACT.
Hello, I'm Jamie White from the ACT Party. I'm the ACT Party's candidate here for the Pakuranga Electorate. But as with the Greens, I'm not actually seeking your vote to be the local MP. I'm seeking your party vote. We are in ACT very happy if you vote for Morris. I hope you won't mind me saying this, but I think he'd make a very good ACT MP. He shares a lot of our ideas. As to the issue tonight, you won't be surprised to find that I agree with Morris that what's really needed is not actually more generous welfare. We already have a welfare state. What's needed is more job opportunities. Nobody gets off the bottom through handouts. They get off the bottom through working, through being productive. And what the government can do to help them most is to create a dynamic economy, which is creating jobs and good paying jobs. That is achieved, by the way, by specifying a legal minimum wage. In fact, high minimum wages create unemployment. It is by having more productive workers that wages go up. So that's what we see mostly to help people get off the bottom. The other thing that children in particular need, well, the most important thing actually is loving and concerned parents. There's not much the government can do directly about that. I think governments, oddly enough, can do some things to damage that. You may notice that in advanced welfare states all around the world, including New Zealand, the number of children brought up in single-parent families is very, very high. Average household size are very, very low. In the UK, the average household now is about 1.3 people. I think here it's about 1.5. In countries without welfare states, the family is still much more intact, and you have large family households. But more directly, what governments can do is in the area of education. Disadvantaged kids typically don't get good educations. That's not just true in New Zealand, it's true everywhere around the world. And ACT has a policy aimed directly at helping the most disadvantaged students in New Zealand. This is our partnership schools policy. Partnership schools are schools that are state funded. The money comes from the government, comes from taxpayers. But the schools are independent of Ministry of Education Control. They're like independent schools. And what that means is that they can take quite different approaches to education, approaches that are much better tailored to the needs of their particular students. And the results that we've already seen with the 5 partnership schools we've got in New Zealand are extremely encouraging. And around the world, partnership schools, or charter schools as they're normally known, do very well at serving those disadvantaged students. I recommend that if you care about the children in poverty, you party vote ACT. Thank you.
It's John Reeves from New Zealand First.
Good evening. I'd really like you to party vote New Zealand First this election because it's your chance to save New Zealand for the next 3 years, because there's some certain things which have been going on for the last 6 years which I'm sure you all don't agree with. Contrary to my friends on the right-wing side of things here, who are sitting on my right actually, incidentally, we won't support the charter schools. The charter schools are something that has to stop. New Zealand First believes education, state education, is about education and not profit-making for private enterprises. This is what National and ACT for. So if you want to stop that, I'd ask you to party vote New Zealand First. Now, a little bit about me. I grew up, my mum was set up community creches over on the North Shore in Birkenhead and Beach Haven, where about half of the time of the population were state houses, and she set up community houses as well. So I saw people on very low incomes coming in for education, and what happened to them after they actually got to do courses, which weren't actually provided for by the state, it was the local councils who were doing it. And I saw these people grow, some who wanted to learn languages or other skills, and afterwards they managed to go and find jobs. Then I've been around the world and I've worked overseas and all sorts of things, so I've got a nice business background. So like New Zealand First, I said we need a balance. We need a balance of left, we need a balance of right, and we need it to be working in harmony. Not extreme rights, as we've just had from my right-hand side, but something which actually is nicely balanced and works. New Zealand needs to do something about poverty, and we say child poverty is a term. We actually call it poverty because it's not just children, it's poor families. So that's why we want to increase the minimum wage up to $17. Back in 2005, the minimum wage was $9. New Zealand First made it a policy to raise it up to $12, and over the 3 years it raised to $12. Since Morris Williamson's been in the National Party, it's only gone up about $2.40, so it's now $14.40. And so we say we can lift it up to $17, and when they say no you can't, well, we did it before, and it worked. People didn't get unemployed, they actually stayed in jobs. And Morris Williamson will tell you about how great the economy is.
How about you let me say
And that
what I
was
want
it.
to say?
And that was it. You know,
I won't speak on your behalf.
we moved the rates up. So it can be done. We also want to see that we want to end the charter schools. We want to have better investment in the health and the education. Health has been not funded adequately. I know people who work for the DHB in Counties Manukau, and they've not had increases, but the workload's increasing 5% per year, so they can't spend as much time on each patient. So it's clear that the government is cutting back, and this is not good for any of us. And also, New Zealand First is concerned that we're the only party that will save the super gold card. All the other parties want to cut it. National's right now doing a review that won't come out till after the election. So you can guarantee to see that it will be cut. So if you want to save the super gold card, you need to party vote New Zealand First because it's common sense.
Kia ora tātou everybody, my name's Roger Fowler from Internet Mana. I'm not standing here as a candidate. Again, I'm asking you to consider giving your party vote to Internet Mana. And I'll tell you why, because I'm actually going to answer the question tonight and not skirt around it. I'm not going to say we're going to do something about poverty or talk about referendum or Margaret Thatcher or charter schools. I'm going to talk about what Internet Mana is actually proposing and actually bringing in. In fact, the leader of Mana, Hone Harawera, has already introduced the bill into Parliament, which has got a lot of traction, a lot of support across the board, and this pertains again to your question, what are we going to do to bring people together around the issue of poverty and child poverty in particular, feeding the kids. And the policy is that there'll be breakfast and lunches provided for kids at school. Also, what we're doing about poverty in New Zealand, we're advocating for a minimum wage of $18.80 in line with the trade union movement, and for the first $25,000 of income would be tax-free. We also want to see education be free again, as it was when I was a youngster. Free tertiary education and free education at school. We're not going to get that by charter schools. I want to salute the statement from the bishops. I think it is a very brave statement for social justice and social equity. In fact, it is very much in line with Mana policy and Internet Mana policy standing for this election. In particular, where the bishops say, call for a strong defence and championship of the needs of the poor and the vulnerable, and to promote the development of what is good for the people, demands that we care for the outcast and the stranger, and call us to protect the natural gifts of the environment. 100% Internet Mana policy, and I ask you, party vote Internet Mana. Thank you very much.